We're continuing the Maimer Nasato Lireicha Neis Lisnoises that the Rebbe said on Yud Beis, or Yud Gimel Tammuz Tafshin Yud Aleph. And as we learned earlier, the Maimer is talking about the Avodah of Nisyonis, which is why the Frierdiker Rebbe sent this Maimer in the year Tafrei Sadi Gimel, 1933, to Russia. The Maimer was specifically sent to the Chassidim in Russia, and that they should use the Maimer, they should learn the Maimer on Yud Beis Tammuz. Because the idea of Yud Beis Tammuz is the power that was given through the holiday of Yud Beis Tammuz, and the days that preceded it started from Gimel Tammuz, is the power that was given in those days to be able to overcome the harsh opposition to Yiddishkeit that was being set then by the communist government, that the Frierdiker Rebbe, through his taikef, through his strength and courage, brought down a light to enable everyone to be able to overpower this, and therefore was sent specifically to the Jews there who were dealing with the same thing and the same issues. However, the Rebbe still gave out this Maimer in Tafshin Yud Aleph 1951, which is the first year of the Rebbe's Nesias, and the Rebbe himself said a Maimer based on this Maimer, which implies that also throughout the years of the Rebbe's Nesias, by the fact that the Rebbe put it as the first Maimer in his Nesias from Yud Beis Tammuz, and there was other Mamorim that started with these words also, it implies that the idea of the power to overcome the Avodas HaNisyonos is something which is especially important for us in our time, in the Daira Shvi, in the generation which is preparing to greet Mashiach. What is the Avodah of Nisyonos? So we explained this earlier at length, and just to go over in short, what the Frierdiker Rebbe says in his Maimer, that there's two types of Avodah. There's Avodah Sabirurim and there's Avodah Nisyonos. The Avodah of Birurim is when a person refines the physical world. He reveals in the physical and material world the truth that it's really godliness, either in a way of dein hanyanle, in a way of doing, of action, through using something physical in order to serve Hashem, and thus showing that its true existence is really godliness by making a bracha and using it only in order to serve Hashem, or in a way of dein loy hanyanle, in a way of inaction, of overpowering the urge to use it when it's against what Hashem wants, when it's something which is from the Shalosh Klippos Atmeis, it's from the three klippos that are totally impure, that can't be elevated for Kedusha. For example, when a person decides not to eat something which is not kosher, then he's showing the fact that the existence of the object tried to lure him to do something against what Hashem wants, is in a sense saying, I exist, and it doesn't matter what Hashem wants because I can use myself, or I can use my power of luring you to go against Hashem. And the person says, no, you don't exist. You don't have an existence against Hashem, and I'm going to show you by not using you. Then there's another concept which is called Avodah of Nisyonos. In the Avodah of Nisyonos, a person doesn't deal with the Nisyon itself. A person rather deals with himself. He finds in himself and awakens in himself a new power, a strong power, which is what we call a taikef atzmi and a helem atzmi, an inner courage, a courage which comes from the essence of his soul, and a bittul atzmi, an inner bittul which is from the essence of the soul, an inner submission of his will to Hashem, which is something that earlier wasn't revealed. It's something that is within him at all times, but it's deeply hidden inside the person. And through the nisayon, through the test, which tries to change the person and tries to convince the person to change his outlook, and the person needs then, in order to be able to overcome it because it's so tough, he needs to reveal and uncover within himself the powers that are within him. Then in that way the person becomes elevated, and that's why we say Nasata Liriaich Neslis Noisis, that through the Nisayan a person becomes elevated. And this is why specifically in the end of Galus, in the very last moments of Galus, which is the end of the concealment of Galus, that's when we were given the power, something which we weren't given as much throughout the Galus. But specifically in the end of Galus, we were given the power to overcome these tests, to be able to reveal this inner essence that a person has. Now, the general idea of this is something that we've seen in the entire way that the Friedrich Rebbe approached the whole imprisonment, which led to the Yemei Agul of Gimel and Yud Beis Yud Gimel Tammuz, that the Friedrich Rebbe made a decision, as the Friedrich Rebbe later told, not to be nispal from them, not to take them into account whatsoever, and as the Friedrich Rebbe said, I looked at them as if they don't exist. Which is the depth of the power from within a Jew, not to fight with the opposition, but rather to realize that it's all an isayin, it's all a test on my resolve, and therefore if I'm going to strengthen my resolve, and I'm going to reveal within myself the courage and the essential power that I have, then they'll just disappear, which is what happened. The Friedrich Rebbe didn't go get involved with them. The Friedrich Rebbe, on the contrary, every time they spoke to him, if they spoke to him in Russian, he answered them in Yiddish, and he refused to give in to any of their demands, even if they had nothing to do with Torah and Yiddishkeit. Just the very fact that they're demanding something just in order to show within himself that they don't exist, their entire demands don't exist, and through that, that's what brought that it disappeared. Now this concept we find by the very first Nisayan in history, which is the tests that Avraham Avinu was tested, and the 10th test that Avraham Avinu was tested was the most important one, was the Nisayan Akedah, the test of the Akedah, and Hashem begged Avraham Avinu, please, I want you to withstand, to overcome this test, that people shouldn't say that the other ones are not real, which means this test was the one which was the ultimate test that there is in history. And in this test of Avraham Avinu, as he was going towards the Akedah, it says that the Satan, the evil inclination, or the Satan, came and showed itself as if it's a river that couldn't be passed through, and Avraham and Yitzchak just kept on walking until the water was up to their nose, and then it disappeared. The Satan came and showed himself as a mountain. They just kept on walking and the mountain disappeared. Which means they didn't go and try and swim or build a raft. On the contrary, the point was they looked at it and said, this thing doesn't exist. The water doesn't exist, the mountain doesn't exist. And through my not taking it into account whatsoever, it will be revealed that it actually doesn't exist. Now this, the Rebbe is now going to explain to us how this concept is something which has to do with every one of us. And each and every one of us has this idea of an Nisayan all the time, and specifically now because that's the main Avodah. That's the main thing which is in the last moments of Galus, is the idea of being able to overcome tests. Until then, tests were something which confused us. And that's why in the time of Mitzrayim it says it was confusing. But now we were given the power to overcome it, because that's our Avodah, that's what it's all about. We've come to the very end when our main goal and our main mission is overpowering the concept of tests, which means revealing within ourselves the essential power and courage which makes the rest, which makes everything disappear, which makes us realize that it doesn't exist. And like the words of the Rebbe, Hu amadavar lahalim v'limnoya, something was set there in order to hold back and to try and to try and conceal and hold back the person from doing what he's supposed to do. It doesn't exist. It was put there, but it's not a real existence. So that's the idea that the Rebbe is explaining to us, how this works and why specifically this is at the last moments of Golus, and how we are meant to overpower it. So the Rebbe explains the following: in every avodah, in everything that a person does, whether it's avodah sabirurim, refining and elevating the world, or the avodah sanisyonis, the avodah of overpowering tests, there's three things that are involved in it. There's the thing with which the person works. For example, in avodah sabirurim, person takes a cup of water and makes a bracha shahakol. There's the cup of water which he's elevating, which he's refining. A person was put into this world in order to elevate and refine the physical world, so there's the thing with which the avodah is. The second thing is the person who has to do the work. That's a Jew who has a neshama that's part of Hashem, who is put into this world and it's sent towards him, these missions, these jobs of refining the physical world. And the third thing is how the work is done. How does the person, what does the person do in order to refine and elevate the thing that he's refining or that test which he's dealing with? So there's the thing which he's refining or elevating, or that the test is involved in. There's the person that has to do it, and there's how the person does it. Now, in all three of these, the Rebbe explains there's a difference between there's the difference between the avodah of birurim, of refining the world, and the avodah of nisyonis when it's a test. Because starting with the object with which the work is being done, there's the major difference. The object that a person is refining is a real object. It's an existence. And the person's job is to show what its real existence is. It's an existence that has a godly spark that sustains it, but the person's job is to show that its real existence is not what seems to be to the eye, which is the physical existence, but its real existence is that godly spark. And as we said, there's the cup of water that the person has to elevate. There's the piece of flesh, the piece of meat that the person has to elevate. The person's mission is to take that piece of meat and to show what it really is. It's a real thing with a spark of godliness by making a bracha and by eating it. Or on the opposite sense, when it's a non-kosher meat, it's also a real existence. It's a real existence which was created by Hashem. And the proof that it's a real existence is because it could also be used for Kedusha. Such as you have non-kosher animal. You have, for example, a dog. A dog is a non-kosher animal that a person is not allowed to eat, but a person is allowed to use it. If someone, Rahman al-Islam, can't see, he could use the dog to guide him. If someone has other uses, a guard dog, he uses the guard dog. He's then elevating it using that physical existence and showing that it's part of Kedusha. It's something which is actually leading the person and helping the person for Kedusha. Even non-kosher meat, for example, can also be used for Kedusha. If a person's sick, Rahman al-Islam, and he needs to eat this, he has no choice. It's in order to save the life of a Jew. By eating it, he's actually elevating it to Kedusha. So the existence exists. The non-kosher meat exists. The non-kosher chocolate bar. It exists. But my way to deal with this existence, how to deal what its true existence is, its spark of godliness that's sustaining it, which it wants to cover up on that spark by saying, eat me, even though Hashem doesn't want you to. Or in the case of a kosher thing, by saying, eat me for the sake of the physical material pleasure that's in it, but don't recognize the godly spark. And I go to the opposite. I use it in order to serve Hashem, or I don't use it in a way that's against what Hashem wants. The thing exists. That's in the avodah of birurim. In the avodah of nisyonos, the idea is that the thing doesn't exist. Even though there's a godly spark that's inside it. And the Rebbe proves, and we mentioned this earlier times, that the Rebbe proves that there must be some godly spark inside it. Because in Mitzrayim it says, they emptied out all the sparks of holiness that were in Mitzrayim, means there is godly spark inside there. But in Nisayin, the godly spark is Chaticha Atzmanasis Nevela. Chaticha Atzmanasis Nevela is when you have a piece of non-kosher meat, and a piece of kosher meat falls into it, which is less than a 60th of the non-kosher meat. It becomes non-kosher to the extent that the kosher meat now becomes non-kosher, and now you need 60 times against the entire thing. And so also over here, the spark of godliness that sustains it usually in a physical object, there's the spark of godliness, there's that godliness that's in it. It's hidden. We don't see it. Our job is to reveal it, to recognize it. In an Nisayin, the spark of godliness itself became darkened to the extent that the only existence here, the spark of godliness itself, also became dark, also became a part of the Shalosh Klippos at Meis. And Mitzvah Hashem, next time we'll continue to explain exactly how that works.